Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Wednesday, March the 11th. Keir Starmer overnight successfully passed a law to get rid of troublesome peers. No, not Peter Mandelson, but the 84 remaining hereditaries from the House of Lords. Having peer-bashing legislation on the statute book might be a crowd pleaser for Labour, but the most troublesome former member of the upper chamber will today continue to wreak havoc. It's a Mandelson moment. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. That's because early this afternoon, the government will begin the process of making public up to 100,000 messages and documents surrounding Peter Mandelson's appointment as ambassador in December 2024, possibly the Prime Minister's most fateful decision. It's not going to be pleasant.
To update ourselves, Peter Mandelson is under police investigation. He denies allegations he passed commercially sensitive documents to Jeffrey Epstein when he was Gordon Brown's business secretary in the late 2000s. But a month ago, the Tories forced the government to agree to the disclosure of a huge dump of documents about the appointment and about Mandelson's business affairs and connections more broadly. Keir Starmer soon gave up first attempts to stop that all coming out, given the mood on his own benches was so furious on this issue that was then agreed to rather on the hoof in the Commons. And the results begin to emerge later today.
And it really is just the first tranche. We think it might largely relate to the period up to Lord Mandelson's appointment. But what's going to come out today and in the coming weeks is unprecedented in scope. The motion agreed by Parliament is, and I'm about to go through it. We're both going to go through it because the scope is amazing. It's to release all papers, emails, minutes, WhatsApps relating to Lord Mandelson's appointment, including the due diligence and vetting seen by Number 10 and the Foreign Office. But it also spells out in detail the following: papers, minutes, emails and WhatsApps between the Prime Minister's then Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, and Lord Mandelson, and between ministers and Lord Mandelson in the 6 months prior to his appointment.
Also due for disclosure, emails, messages and minutes of all meetings between Lord Mandelson and government figures during his time as ambassador, as well as details of any payments that were made to him on his departure from the role, when we know that he was insisting on a handsome payoff, and also any details on that from the civil service side. So, Sam, as you say, this is really wide scope. My sense is that relatively few objections were raised by the intelligence services on security grounds, though there likely will be some omissions on names of anyone sensitive in that way that he was meeting in the course of his duties when he was in Washington. But the diplomatic fallout is really about messages from Mandelson to officials in Number 10 and at the Foreign Office, which could still put things in a very disobliging light. And that's something where the spooks would say that's not really our problem. You know, that kind of reputation management is not what we get concerned about. So 2 Whitehall officials have told Politico that they are concerned that Mandelson, who was often candid and off the cuff and spicy in his remarks that he made about others, what he might have said about Donald Trump and his colleagues, and given the tinderbox state of relations at the moment with Keir Starmer there, it wouldn't take much to ignite it, would it?
No. Okay, I'm very struck by you saying that you're hearing that intelligence-linked refusals to disclose are quite limited. Look, remember when this was all being fought over a month ago, Keir Starmer wanted an exemption from disclosure, anything that could jeopardise international relations, and didn't have a majority in the Commons to do that. His own side said no. So that's the problem. And I think you completely identify where the biggest damage might be done. And if that wasn't enough, Anne, also in the vast pile of disclosures today and in the coming days will be Peter Mandelson's interest in relation to the now defunct Global Counsel, the consultancy firm that he set up. And of course, that matters because we believe they did have clients in Russia and in China. So that'll be part of the tens of thousands of documents that we see.
Global Council, a whole other cache of staff. And that is where security concerns were raised in vetting about Mandelson's business links. Indeed, they may have focused more on that at the time than on Epstein. At least that is my sense. Let's see if that's still what we think, Sam, when we've had more visibility on this. We do know that Epstein approached Mandelson for help to get a Russian visa, for instance, in 2010. And from emails in the files that Epstein was targeting young women there for sex. Now, there's no proof that Lord Mandelson knew this. It just reminds us, however, of how entangled Epstein's sexual obsessions and that miasma around him was with his business life and therefore with other friendships that he had. So we also know some things that won't be covered, and that is stuff blocked by the Metropolitan Police, which they think could compromise in any way their investigation into Peter Mandelson's affairs. So the question is, how wide or how limited will that exemption be? And does it give us a clue about where the Met is looking in a lot more detail? All we know is that after PMQs, Darren Jones will stand up, make a statement, and when he sits down again, the release begins.
Convenient that it's after Prime Minister's questions, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Good news, I'll be on Sky all afternoon and evening with our big screen, throwing in these documents into the big screen and analysing them for you. So check out the channel, the app, and we'll filter the best bits for you. I was talking to government figures last night about all of this, and they do expect this to dominate. Even though this might not be the most eye-popping tranche of the various exchanges to come, they think it'll eclipse everything else, including the politics around Iran, for the next day or two. I was also discovering a bit about how this was done, Anne. You might think that when there's a big disclosure like this, the government can essentially press a button and do a big sweep of electronic communications to cover everything. Well, of course, that doesn't quite work because you've got lots and lots of WhatsApps in this disclosure. So what's been going on is the Cabinet Office has been going round MPs and ministers and just saying, have you got anything with any exchanges with Lord Mandelson? And if you have, is there any chance, please, you could hand them over sort of one by one? So some MPs were cheering the fact that they put down a nil return to me last night. Others were worried about the most anodyne of exchanges because everything has had to be disclosed. And then there's another category. How can we put this? Those that I wonder whether they did fully comply with the Cabinet Office request, because it's quite hard for the Cabinet Office to really tell what's on your phone if you don't hand it over. And there's no apparent sanction for not doing what's required. Anyway, so that's how it works. What's your read of the politics of all of this, Anne?
My first read on all this is it takes place before the era of disappearing messages in WhatsApp, which now, as you say, everyone will be quickly switching to if they haven't got it, which is very unfortunate for the likes of us. That's a very good point, actually, that other than fear of being found out in another way, which would be truly terrible for any MP. There is no obvious way to force people to hand over WhatsApp. So you just at this point are relying on them, thinking it's better to have anything out there and just say it was anodyne than be caught out. Two big problems for Starmer, since you were just asking about our take on the big picture. So to me, it's this. He argues that he didn't know the depth of the relationship that Peter Mandelson had and continued to have with Epstein after Epstein's first conviction for sex with an underage girl. He says he was lied to by Mandelson on that point of frequency of contact and depth of friendship. But we also know that the Prime Minister had to say that quite emphatically, and that shows a bit of vulnerability. Any fresh details, any time, Sam, any dates, anything that sets off a new line of inquiry just brings us back to that question, doesn't it, of the Prime Minister's judgment, and even the absence of detail and the way that the vetting proceeded just will make one think, like, did Keir Starmer really want to know? Were the things that he just would really wanted to get past quite quickly in order to make Peter Mandelson appointable? If you talk to people close to Lord Mandelson himself, well, you hear that he feels the main vetting conversations were short. One lasted only 20 minutes, so he tells friends, and that he wasn't asked for more than a cursory account of his relationship with the late sex trafficker. Now, that does seem a bit disingenuous given the degree of familiarity that we now see in the files. But I think he would be arguing through his lawyers that, given that it was clear that he knew Epstein after the first conviction, if the Prime Minister didn't think that was a massive bar to office, then he just answered the questions that he was put, and it wasn't incumbent on him to offer more information.
Whoa, that's actually incredible. So friends of Peter Mandelson basically say they didn't try very hard.
Basically, yeah.
Well, that's the most toxic charge that there is against Keir Starmer and his then Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, that they operated a hear no evil, see no evil approach to this. Lord Mandelson's lawyers would say it's not evil. That's just a phrase. It's just an expression. For me, the significance is about one thing that will be in the documents released today and one thing that won't, right? The big thing for me that's the most damning for Keir Starmer is the 2023 Financial Times article that went through all of this and said that even after Jeffrey Epstein's conviction for sex trafficking, for trafficking underage girls, even then, Peter Mandelson wanted to accept hospitality from him in New York, right? That was in the public domain. That was a question put to Keir Starmer in the run-up to the general election. He knew about it. It's really hard to claim he didn't know about the scope and depth of the relationship if, as the Prime Minister was, and we've got him on tape responding to it, that article is in the public domain. We expect that FT article to be part of the disclosure. What we're not expecting, because of the efforts of Scotland Yard, is for the back and forth between Morgan McSweeney and Peter Mandelson. I think there was a letter authored by Morgan McSweeney, but in the Prime Minister's name, which went to Peter Mandelson, which asked him to spell out specific questions about things like the hospitality accepted and so on. That document, I think, doesn't appear. Whether or not that helps or actually, when it comes out, possibly harms the Prime Minister, because Keir Starmer's talked about that document in slightly fuzzy terms in the past. I'm fascinated to see it, but we don't think we'll get that today. Whether that actually helps the case for the prosecution, I don't know. Then you touch completely rightly on the global implications of this, and particularly our really quite rocky relationship at the moment with Donald Trump. I just want to rewind to June 2019. You'll remember in Trump 1, back then, emails by the then British ambassador to Washington, Kim Darroch, were leaked to a Sunday paper in which Darroch described the Trump administrations as dysfunctional and inept. Trump went absolutely bonkers. The retribution was swift. He said, "We will no longer deal with him, Kim Darroch." And Kim Darroch had to resign 2 days later. So much of this traffic, we believe, has gone through the Washington embassy. I mean, God forbid what somebody typed in anger or in jest that is now going to hit the public domain.
Indeed, and anything that might have been in jest and spiky in that way that Peter Mandelson often communicated in easier times with Donald Trump in the UK relationship, maybe that could have been smoothed over. But the president does seem very reactive, doesn't he? That may also account for a degree of expectation management happening in Downing Street. Playbook is reporting on that this morning. Number 10, downplaying how much of a perilous moment this is. It's saying that the police inquiry, I think they're quite keen to have this handed over. This is a matter for the police and it's off our plate, will limit the scope of the most damaging stuff. In fairness, it may only detail a lot of stuff that we know already, but as you say, Sam, I think it is about the language that gets used here as well. The tone matters, and just the way that things look, when you see them black and white, is different from saying, "Oh, we already knew that." It's just the oldest expectation management in the book is nothing new here, except that we'll all be poring over it for the next 10 hours or so.
Right. We ought to do the sort of T's and C's, if you like, the legal bit. Peter Mandelson was arrested and bailed 2 weeks ago on Monday by the Metropolitan Police after the Speaker of the House of Commons warned police of rumours that he might be a flight risk. That brought forward what would have been an interview on a voluntary basis at some point in March. The bail conditions have since been lifted and Peter Mandelson has been handed back his passport.
At the time, a spokesman for Mishcon de Reya, Peter Mandelson's lawyers, said the arrest was prompted by a baseless suggestion that he was planning to leave the country and take up permanent residence abroad. There is absolutely no truth whatsoever in any such suggestion. We have asked the Metropolitan Police Service for the evidence relied upon to justify the arrest. Peter Mandelson's overriding priority is to cooperate with the police investigation, as he has done throughout this process, and to clear his name.
And he has repeatedly apologised to the victims. Right. We now ought to get on with, in the last 5 minutes, a little bit of other political news. We've got the delayed weekly YouGov Sky News Times voting intention poll. This week it has Reform UK unchanged on 23, the Tories on 19%. They're up 3 this week. Greens down 2 on 19% as well. So Greens are now tied second place with the Tories. A little bit of the publicity sort of presumably falling away. Labour on 17, up 1, and the Lib Dems on 14%. I am duty-bound and to reflect the fact that Reform UK are causing a bit of fuss and attacking YouGov over their methodology, which I think nobody would disagree is linked to the fact that they're not doing as well in YouGov polls as they had been, and they think they do in other pollsters. But by the return of post, I am also duty-bound to say that YouGov, whose MRP was the closest when it came to seats at the last election, have published a memo today about its methodology in order to try and answer any questions anybody might have.
What an excellent and equitable postman you are, Sam Coates. Still, I'm just struck by the fact that the Conservatives nibbling towards reform there on those numbers, whether or not we agree on the methodology. It's Prime Minister's question, so let's see what the PM has to say on Iran. This morning, it sounds like a ship may have been hit in the Straits of Hormuz. The UK Maritime Monitor said a suspected unknown projectile hit a ship that started to fire and forced the crew to evacuate. So let's see how that story develops, and overall signs that it may be getting harder and harder for shipping there, and Iran looking for other choke points, Sam, on maritime activity there to pile pressure on those attacking Iran.
There's also reassurance in the last half an hour about the health of the new Supreme Leader, which has raised quite a lot of eyebrows because we didn't know there was a question around the health of the new Supreme Leader of Iran. But again, more of that through the day on Sky News and I'm sure on Politico. Yesterday, Anne, the thing we headlined the podcast on and that we both picked up independently were claims of tension between the Prime Minister, number 10, and the newish Chief of the Defence Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, who, frankly, unlike a lot of CDSs in the past, had slightly less frontline experience as an engineer. And actually, I found more people talking up the tensions there after we recorded, some unhappiness about his ability to manage the budgetary element of all of this, some questions about whether he'd put decisions in front of the Prime Minister quick enough, some questions about whether the Prime Minister is asking the right questions of his CDS, given he is still, after all, relatively new to the post. Now, I had a message this morning from my defence editor colleague, Deborah Haynes, that I found really striking. Just had a bit more of a back and forth about the aircraft carrier. If you remember, on Saturday, I and others revealed that it had been put on heightened readiness. But on Monday, number 10 rather dismissed and sort of threw the MOD under the bus by saying, that's not to do with the Middle East. But a source with knowledge of the carrier's schedule kind of really questioned that, told her it was being put on much shorter notice to move at an earlier date than was expected. Yes, the aircraft carrier had been expected to go to the high north at some point relatively soon to deal with anti-Russian operations and exercises there. But the scramble happened faster than anybody expected. Everybody is rushing to meet the new demand. It is curious for number 10 to say it's not linked to events in the Middle East, given the timing and the strain that this is putting on already stretched resources. So there's just these tension there, which I think will just roll out in a bigger fashion in the weeks and months to come.
Back and forth over the readiness of the armed forces or lack thereof, who is to blame, and also sort of who is making the decisions on what basis of evidence. Quite often, it seems in this, your Deborah Haynes and our Esther Webber, who are both really big in understanding the intrigue of the MOD, will have fascinating stories on this. And as Playbook points out, last night, the Cross-Party Defence Committee, which is chaired, in fact, by a Labour MP and defence expert, releasing critical statements after a so-called secret briefing on the Middle East with defense officials. Tan Desi's committee saying the situation has also underlined long-standing and grave concerns, which we share, about whether the Royal Navy has sufficient capacity and resilience to respond effectively to a crisis at times of worsening global security. Pretty damning stuff coming from that committee, and I know that committee pretty well. And it's not only him, shall I put it that way? It's a very cross-party and a lot of work going together, cooperating across the parties to try to raise the temperature about this, in the hope that it improves things. But of course, then cometh the answer from number 10, who is to blame? And I think that it may not be the most productive question that you can ask, but inevitably it will be asked if military chiefs say they're not getting clear enough guidance. And number 10 says, in return, hang on, I thought you were more ready for this than you turn out to be.
And there's the question of the lack of funding. Rachel Reeves has authorised additional money from the reserve for ongoing operations, but we still haven't seen the defence investment plan. Maybe Rachel Reeves will be asked about that when she appears before the Treasury Select Committee this morning. Keir Starmer will be before G7 leaders for a video call this afternoon. But the 20-minute alarm has just sounded, prohibiting any further discussion. That's it. That's our time up. So we will be back tomorrow for Politics at Sam and Anne's after the first. What is the collective name for an enormous number of files about Peter Mandelson? The first vomit of files about Peter Mandelson.
A splurge might be nicer if people are having their breakfast. Just thinking.
After that, see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.